So I'm excited to be here guest hosting the premiere episode of Our Work with Pavan. Pavan, thank you so much for having me. This is an exciting journey being on this podcast with you. So you're kind of a big deal. I'm going to start with that and just bear with me for a minute here. So you are the general manager of Lafarge. You're here in Saskatchewan, but this is like a global company and you're GM here. And you're under 40. So, I mean, that's impressive.
Like 5 minutes under
Come
40,
on.
but I'll take it. Yeah.
But still, you've been doing big things for a long time. So with your work, like this is a heavy male industry. Was this the dream? Was this what you wanted to be doing when you were a kid?
No, absolutely not. I really didn't seek out any of this. I didn't seek out the male-led thing. The construction industry didn't necessarily appeal to me. Even really the work that I'm doing, that was not the plan. So I started off at Lafarge 20 years ago as a summer student in accounts payable. And spent a bunch of time stayed on with them after my kind of summer term, really did a lot of work on like accounting roles, finance roles, some ERP system implementation stuff. And then in 2010, moved to Saskatoon to be the controller. And that was a really pivotal year in the sense that two things happened. So one, I came across a mentor and a sponsor, really, Doug Panku, who was willing to take a chance on me, kind of believed in me and the work I was trying to do. And then I also realized that I don't want to be an accountant. So at that time as the controller, I was doing a lot of statement and variance analysis on all of the business units here, and then handing off that information to the manager of the business unit to then go execute strategy, develop strategy, and really manage the business. And in that time, I realized I love accounting. I love financial statements. It's my roadmap, but I want to be in the business, executing and doing the work. So yeah. And lucky for me, when I communicated that to Doug, he quickly found me an opportunity and allowed me to move into operations. And that was in 2011. And I literally have never looked back. Like I love the work that I do as GM of this construction materials and construction company. Like no 2 days are the same. It's literally everything from contracts, risk management, strategy, still an element of finance because we're all driven by financial results, and leadership. I have oversight of the operations, but I get to kind of be the quarterback of it all. And it's pretty cool work.
So you already touched on it, it's a male dominated industry, and even finance. Like finance is kind of my background too. It's really male dominated. So what do you think made you successful rising the ranks when you are a young woman doing so?
I mean, what made me successful? I think what Doug saw in me, looking back on it, is the thing that's made me successful, is I can deliver results. Like I look at business like I said, so the financial statements to understand how it's performing. But to me, it's not a game. I don't want to call it a game, but it's a project. It's like, how do we make it better? How do we develop it? How do we improve it? How do we build teams? Like all those things that people put in a job description for executives is the things that I like to do that come fairly natural to me. So I think really just what's made me successful is like putting really good people around me to shore up my weaknesses and to build on their strengths, and then really just like getting better and better and better every day. Good people, continuous improvement, I think is like how simple business is. This big, huge topic, like again, Lafarge is a multinational organization. Within my scope as general manager, we have ready mix plants. So there's 3 ready mix plants, an asphalt plant, a road construction division, and then aggregates. So sand and gravel mining. And like every business is so different, but and has their nuances, and we have our complexities as to how to survive in a multinational organization, but it's all people and just showing up every day and getting better. It's really that simple.
Yeah, it is. I totally agree with you. And I find that about the work I do too, is like boiling it down. Most of the work that we do is about internal work and then bringing that forward with the relationships we have. So great segue, because this is called Our Work. So what does this podcast then mean to you?
So this podcast is like so many things, but our work, I feel like it's that piece of like continuous improvement, self-mastery, reflection, development, like the work that we do to kind of be our best selves or be our most authentic selves is the thing that keeps coming up for me. And originally when I started this, like, and there's a whole story there, but I thought I was creating a podcast about business. And I jumped right in. I was like, okay, Nick, I need you to like create this wall and this set, and like recorded a few. That was how I started. I didn't have a name. I didn't have a brand. I just started. And in those conversations, I realized really quickly, well, business is people. So I've created a podcast about people. And the work that we do towards like development and improvement and self-mastery at work is the same thing that makes me a better partner, makes me a better mother.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like our work is really the work that we're all doing in all areas of our life, although there is really strong tones of business in the podcast.
Course. Yeah, right.
Yeah, because that's just me.
Right? That's what you're doing. You're leaning into that.
Yeah. And then the other piece of it, and I haven't touched on it yet, but it's like the hour work is also the thing that connects a lot of us. A lot of people that I've now connected with through the podcast or just talking about the project, like everybody's doing the same work, and improvement in my life or change in my life has a ripple effect for everybody around me. So it's like the hour piece is also how we're all connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
This is going to be such a powerful podcast too, because I think you are bringing in that business scope, which is, that's your jam. That's my jam. It's like we live in this world, this corporate space, but also guess what? At the end of the day, humans are the ones in that space. And that's something that we forget. And I think you're sort of helping to remind people of the fact that we are humans operating in a business environment.
Right. Sorry, you mentioned you talked about like the work you're doing. I think it's really important for context as well, just to understand.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how we met, right?
Yeah.
So the work I do is as a leadership coach. I'm working with teams, individuals like yourselves, trying to just navigate that blend of I do this every day and I want to enjoy it, or I want to make sure that it fulfills me or it adds to my life. So I'm working with a lot of leaders on leadership coaching, also working with teams, and you and I can get into this too, because really the personalities that come to the table and run organizations fundamentally affect how it feels for everybody else to show up there on a Monday. And I think I've seen that, unfortunately, from some bad perspectives, but helping leaders and teams really bring that humanity back into work. And it's funny how you were mentioning earlier about like, at the end of the day, we're all just people and we're all just trying to do things together. Like the other work I do is, corporate governance. And I've just been thinking lately, like policies, procedures, and all that stuff. I love that stuff, but we do that for people. We do that for people to feel good. We do that so that they have transparency. We do that so that people understand what's coming down the pipe. I think everything in business boils down to feeling good as a person in that world. Yeah. And so now you and I get to work together, which has been so exciting because we are, I think, speaking that same language, right? Like we see the same things coming up in businesses. I'm a little bit outside of it. You're living in it.
Yeah.
So is that what some of the guests are going to be talking about on the podcast?
Yeah. So the guests so far, and I think I'm about 9 into it now. They've really been all over the place. So, like, for example, I will say the thing that the guests have in common is folks that I've come across or like people in my network have recommended that are doing something which to them just feels like them being their most authentic self. They show up and they do this thing, but that thing is like uniquely powerful, right? So for example, I talked to a gentleman named Todd who is like a wonderful, wonderful leader. Like if we had more leaders like Todd Steen, literally like the business world would change overnight. And like you said, how does it feel to show up on a Monday? Like I can almost guarantee anybody who's worked for Todd Steen
pretty excited about Mondays.
Pretty excited about their work about Mondays, and he's so good at it. He almost struggled to kind of explain it. And I realize it's because it's like so authentic
So
to
natural
him.
for him. He doesn't see it even.
It's literally, he just shows up as himself, but that's his gift, right? This thing that people are like, go to workshops and Harvard Business School to learn to be better leaders. He just shows
naturally
up, right?
in him.
Yeah. So Todd's thing was leadership and people and authenticity. Shayna, I spoke to, she's an Indigenous policewoman who went into entrepreneurship, and I reached out to her and wanted to talk about the path to entrepreneurship. And it became a conversation not only about that, but about her mother, she had just recently lost, who had a very significant impact on her and the life of like so many people around her, and the role of an Indigenous woman as a police officer and what that looked like. But again, like, so we talked about all those things, and then looking back on it, Shayna's got this gift for like intuition almost. Like she talked about it, like, you know, I was kind of, you know, took a break from policing because I felt like I needed to think about something different, or I just needed some space to figure this out. But like when she talked about her story, she's done that several times. Like she's 42, 43. Yeah. And several times throughout her life, she's like paused and done like a complete pivot, right? Like, so that's her kind of magical thing, is recognizing when it's time to like pivot and do something different. Very powerful work too. Like, so those are just like two examples. A lot of folks I've talked to are either entrepreneur. Almost everybody I've talked to is either entrepreneurs or they're leading large teams or complex organizations. One gentleman, Aaron Yonke, he is running. I ran into him or met him in his time in Saskatoon running PCL Construction, which is a large general contractor. Well, he now runs California for PCL Construction.
It's a bit bigger of a market.
Yeah. And just like hearing about his path, about like all these smaller markets to larger markets. But his gift is probably like, he just thinks really outside of the box, like innovation. Yeah. He's a very innovative thinker, and he has lots and lots of energy. Like you just feel it the minute you're around him. So I would say like everybody is doing something really interesting, really unique. But I think everybody has a lot of authenticity. Yeah. That's what I'm noticing.
It's a theme.
Yeah. That's starting to be the theme now that I'm 9 into it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you bring up authenticity, because we've talked about that so much. And, you know, honestly, I find it a double-edged sword kind of word. I mean, it's almost like the added pressure of like, okay, now I have to be authentic. But being authentic can really look very different for very different people. And it might be very different in different seasons of life. It might even be, you know, I'm authentic as a mom in this way. I'm authentic as a businesswoman in this way, as a partner in this way. So if we were to say, okay, Pavan, what's your authentic self? Where do you start? What does that look like?
Yeah. I think I have like at least two very like distinct personas as my authentic self. Yeah. Because, like, I think at work, I've been told this, so I don't think this, I know this. Like, I think I'm not exactly the most approachable person, which, like, shocks me. Because, like, and even at work, you just don't see it as much. But at home, I'm, like, the biggest softie.
Right.
And, like, I don't make a decision at home. Yeah. Like, it's just, like, there's two very distinct sides. But I think what's common in the two is I really genuinely care about people. I genuinely care about improvement and getting.
Can we go a little deep here?
Yeah.
So, sorry, coaching side coming out, right? Like, do you think that the unapproachable side of you is your natural self? Or is that something that just felt like the walls had to go up in the industry you're in?
There is spaces, yes. There is spaces, and I like this is really highlighted for me. Like the last month, I've been paying attention to this, like spaces where I can just like show up versus like where I feel like I do have to have my walls up a little bit. So within the team in Saskatoon, I don't have my walls up at all. Like I am generally my authentic self. If I'm coming across as unapproachable, it's just because I've been sitting in 8 hours of meeting, or I've been talking to people for 8 hours, and I just like, I'm checked out. Like I'm making a coffee in a coffee room and just looking at it and not looking.
Introverted time.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I'm just like fizzled out. Right. So I think at the Saskatoon office, at home, like it's kind of a matter of, it's a byproduct of where I'm at.
Yeah.
I think where the walls, and not even now, like I think previously the walls were up in more of like the executive meetings with the executive team above me or the Western Canada team or the training session that has people from all over the world on it, right? Or in it. And so I think in those settings, it was always like, well, I'm the like, and it's just not the case anymore. I would be like, I look very different than everybody here. There's not a lot of women. There's not anybody Indian, but those things have like changed quite a bit over the last 4 years even.
Yeah.
And so, I think I don't think I have my walls up very often anymore. Too much so to the point, like now I'm at the point where it's like, this idea you're trying to get us to implement is wrong. And this is why I think it's wrong and share my opinion a little bit more. But yeah, I think we need more of that.
I think so too. And the way you've described the majority of the guests, you've kind of highlighted their successes. I mean, you called on these guests because they intrigued you and there was something about them that drew, you to want to connect with them. And you've mentioned that all of them are feeling really authentic. Yeah. So there's an energy around someone who's authentic and we want to be around that.
Yeah.
So does that feel like something that you see more broadly in business at this point?
No.
Yeah.
No. It's the exception. It's not the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for so long there is nobody talks about it, but there is a certain type of person. There's a certain way to present yourself if you want to get to like a CEO level, for example.
100%.
And I think the vast majority of time and energy a lot of leaders put in is to emulate that style.
Absolutely agree.
Which is not their own.
No.
So that first of all, they're terrible at it because it's not authentic. Like you're not going to like create someone else's aura or like way of presenting themselves. Yeah. So I think, I think we spent too much time emulating other people's styles, trying to pigeonhole everybody to like the right way to be. And I don't even think we realize we're doing it because we do it in a way of like leadership training, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So something that came up for me recently is I was in a workshop type setting and the topic at hand was improving safety culture. And that's, we work in a very safety sensitive environment. That's a topic that we spend a lot of energy on. And so the thing that was said and repeated quite a few times throughout the session was, in order to improve safety culture, your team members, so your people in the field, in the plant, in the truck, whatever it might be, need to feel that you as a leader are fully invested in their personal life and understand their reason to work safe. So reason to work safe meaning, kids, partners, hobbies, that type of thing. And like that aligns with who I am and how I lead. And I think the person that was presenting this information, it aligns with them as well. But what if like you're giving this advice to people, you're like, what if they don't care about people, right? Like you're telling people to pretend like you care about your team members to create a good safety culture. So just like, I don't think anybody caught it or thought about it the way that I do.
Yeah.
But I was just like, to me, I was like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know. It just doesn't like, these things don't make sense to me, right? Yeah. Yes, you should care about your people and that will help build a safety culture. Absolutely true.
If you already inherently do.
Yeah.
But you can't fake it.
I don't think you can.
No.
I think people see right through that stuff and it just doesn't connect on a deeper level. I could be wrong. Like,
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think you're probably not wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love where you're going with this because we have been told certain things, like you're supposed to look a certain way, no matter, like depending on the job you have or the career path you want to take, these are the correct steps for you to get there.
Yeah.
We get inundated with that for so long, but there are people out there doing things very differently and very successfully and blazing their own trail. And we try to just ignore like that's not happening.
Yeah.
Like, no, traditional is best. Follow the roadmap that you've been given. That's the best.
Yeah.
But could you imagine someone, and this is the thing that I always love talking about. I do believe that we are all very, very unique. Like everybody's a snowflake. So don't expect, the neighbor beside you to think and act the same way you do. What would it be like if someone in that session were to say, you know what, I'm not really motivated by caring for other people. What else you got?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a little bit startling, but also refreshing. Like, okay, let's think about it because we do need to motivate people to work in that direction of a safety culture.
Yeah.
So allow them to express what that would be for them, what that motivator would be for them.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Do you think that'd be acceptable?
No,
No,
and,
because
and
of
then
course
like,
you have to care about people.
yeah, well, and that's like the other thing, right? Like it's that cookie cutter thing,
Totally
right?
cookie
Like
cutter.
we talk so much about like inclusivity
Mm-hmm.
in large corporations now
Yeah.
and psychological safety.
Yeah.
But like I also don't think it exists. I think we're doing a lot of talking.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, it's starting to
Yeah.
in the unicorns,
Yeah.
but as a whole it doesn't exist. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more of that? You've been a champion for diversity in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get authentic advocates?
I think the first thing is you need to start telling the truth.
Yeah. Okay. What does that look like?
Well, this is my experience. I've seen a lot of panels within companies or associations or anything, really, any type of event. And the panels are usually high performing women at the highest ranks of companies having conversations about their path. And with it, like there has been exceptions. There's been some of these women that I feel have told like told their own truth, but have presented a well-rounded picture about some of the pros and cons of a woman coming up in a male-led space, for sure. But that's the exception. The majority, I feel like, fall in two camps. And the one camp that, and everybody loves this, is like, oh no, I worked hard just like everybody else. And I got to the space like without any extra anything. I didn't have to work any harder than the next person. I worked just as hard. And I didn't have, there was no advantages that got me here. So there's that side of the story.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side of the story, which is everything was tough every single step of the way. Woe is me.
Yeah.
That's how I perceive it anyways when I hear that story. And like, I think
it sounds like it's either superhero or victim.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. And we love superheroes running companies, right?
Of course. You just have all the faith in the world that they can get everything done.
Yeah. So I think like to me, it makes sense why you present that side of the story. But is that the whole truth? Right?
Can you imagine a woman getting up there and being like, this was the worst. It was so hard. I doubted myself every moment. I really didn't think this was even the right path. The money was good and the benefits were good. And yeah, I'm going to keep it up. That's like a real story, but you're not going to hear that on a panel.
Or my experience, which like I feel like I had a lot of advantages along the way, for sure. Like even I remember when I first moved into Ready Mix, there was an old grumpy guy on a job site that everybody hated to deal with because he was the old guy that was going to throw the hard hat and yell at you. He saw me and didn't know how to handle me. And all of a sudden I became like the go-to for the old grumpy guy because I could communicate with him and get somewhere. Like that was an advantage, right? I had... Like I was always like the older gentlemen that like are like very seasoned and really good at what they do on a job site. They just, again, didn't know how to handle young women, but they always became like my biggest like teachers and champions, right? Like I had those advantages. I didn't like, I grew up, I think maybe 10, 15 years before me might have had these issues. I never got sexually harassed on a job site. Like it's all the gray. Like our generation, or at least I'm 20 years into it, I felt like I dealt with a lot of the gray, but not the black and white. So I had a lot of advantages. On the flip side, I also was underestimated every step of the way. I had like lots of people said, well, she just like Doug only gave her a chance because she's like young, right? And diversity targets and right? And
ticked all the boxes. Like,
you got some brownie points at the corporate side to go and make a move like that. Like, so I, again, like, so, and then the big one is, and we don't talk enough about this, is the unconscious bias, right? So me, like I said, now I'm very like, hey, I don't agree with this initiative. This is the problem, right? Studies, the research supports, we are much more comfortable with a man presenting that opinion.
Totally.
Right? Than a woman. So both will be labeled as opinionated, but one will be opinionated, oh, he'll make a great leader. Opinionated, oh, she's
going to
difficult.
ruffle feathers. We can't work with her. She doesn't get along with people. Resting bitch face.
Exactly. All these things, right? She's difficult, right? So you got two people spoken up, labeled as opinionated, which is true. but then one has a negative connotation attached to it and the other a
that's a
positive, right? So that's the thing. Like, I've never heard a leader within a company. Some of the panels outside of like when you're not in a
It's a
room
conference
full of,
setting, we're generalizing things.
or the audience is primarily women and the topic is inclusivity. I've seen that discussed there or touched on there. I've never seen a woman within a company talking about her journey through that company saying, but you guys don't know how to take me, or like I had to present information differently because of the unconscious bias.
We've already touched on so many things here. Like, this whole concept of being authentic at work. And it so relates to the psychological safety. It relates to the diversity inclusion initiatives, Indigenous rights initiatives. Like, what are you seeing? How are we doing?
I mean, it depends on the organization.
Yeah.
And even more than the organization, it depends on the leader of that team or that business.
Absolutely. It's a personal level thing. Yeah.
I think there's some teams that are doing exceptionally well and they're reaping the benefits. They're the ones that are outperforming.
Yeah.
Even companies, right? Like, there's companies that are doing it differently.
Yeah.
But as a whole, I think we're failing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's why, like, people talk about like the Great Resignation or even now everybody, and some of it, so every company or every organization, every area or industry is having a workforce issue.
Yes.
As far as I know.
Yeah.
At least in our space, they certainly are. But we're not thinking about it. We're thinking about it like, okay, the boomers are retiring.
Yeah.
Yes, true. But I think there's a little bit more to it.
100%.
Right? A lot of people are dropping out of the workforce. A lot of people want more flexibility or don't want to be in the office Monday to Friday. And I think there's a lot of missed opportunity right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said you didn't use this word, but I'm hearing the word that you were called to do this podcast.
Yeah.
So what went into that? How did you come up with this idea, and how did you give it enough energy and space to go like, yeah, I'm really going to do this. I'm not going to put it on the back burner.
So I say called because like it just like kept coming up for me and didn't matter how many times I was like, no, like this is not my thing, or like who's got the time, like this, you don't make money doing this, like all those, like when I kept putting away, it wouldn't go away because it also just like made sense for me. I'm the type of person, like 10 minutes after I meet you, I don't do small talk, like not even a little bit. I like, tell me
deep now.
Yeah. Tell me why your first marriage ended and tell me like what drives you about your work and how we're going to solve global warming. Like I'm the type, like I love like the deep conversations and things like that. So part of it was like that. It just made sense. Like even when I was younger, I remember again, in a traditional Indian household, the women were usually like, anybody who's Punjabi or Indian, or a lot of cultures actually will understand this. Like after a meal, it was always the women in the kitchen cleaning and tidying up and doing all of that. And the guys drinking whiskey around a table talking about like business and the economy and like all these things that I was like, I want to, like, I'm sitting in the kitchen hanging out with all my aunts and my mom. And I'm looking over like, I want to talk about that stuff. Like I want to hear what these guys are saying, right? So yeah, like always wanted to talk about business. It's like the thing that I love to do. Always wanted to have deep conversations, kept coming up, could not put it away, like to save my life. And then there was also just like an element of like a lot of space for me all of a sudden. I was always in a new role every 2 years, the way that my career shook out. Yeah. But I've held this GM role now for 8. Yeah. And was in school on to the next degree while I was doing that. And like the last few years, part of it is becoming a mother. Yeah. Yeah, a bunch of different things. But all of a sudden I felt like there was space for something different. Yeah. And this was the right thing to fill it.
You've created a platform for you to personally be authentic, finally, in one full space, and also to build a community. So what are you hoping that your audience will get out of the podcast?
So it's just like, different perspective to add to the conversation. I'm hoping people will just feel like inspired from hearing a lot of this cool stories, and just want to double down on the work. Yeah. So yeah, I'm hoping it's just conversations that resonate. And for everybody, I think it'll be a little bit different, but I'm hoping
what they take away might depend on each episode.
Yeah. Or they might listen and be like, that's silly. Why would you do that?
It's like,
who knows?
Who wants to live an authentic life? Don't be ridiculous.
Yeah.
There would be people who would be like that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about your childhood. It sounds quite traditional and maybe a little bit like, did you feel a little bit like the black sheep there too then?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a part of your natural life experience is feeling a little bit not quite in the space that sees you.
Yeah.
So have you found that space yet?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, definitely with Nick and some friendships and things like that, definitely found my space. And even, you know, these rooms that I'm talking about, it's not my leadership team in Saskatchewan. Yeah. In that room, we have authenticity.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have, like, we're doing it differently in Saskatchewan.
Okay.
And it shows.
Yeah.
Like it feels really, really good for me. Whereas over the last 8 years, I've had pockets of that. But now our team has just evolved. Like a lot of the folks that have been with me since the beginning of my time as GM are just doing like leveled up and grown and developed, much like I have. And then some of the other folks are new to the team. So it's just like that team environment that we have, like that's like, I feel really good about the work that we do here locally.
So what do you think is attributed to that culture that you've created?
I think I inherited some of it for sure. Like, I think that's just the Saskatchewan way.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Like it's relationship based.
Totally.
It's smallish community. Like a lot of the work that we do is relationship based. Right. So I think some of it is the community. I think it's also how some of the people are wired. And of course, I'm going to gravitate towards those people.
Yeah.
So some of the people we've added to the team work very much in the same way that I work or want to work. And that makes sense because I would have selected them or had a hand in selecting them anyways. Right. And yeah, I think a lot of it is the culture here locally, as well as just the way that these people are wired. They're exceptional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a leader, what's your role in harnessing that energy and ensuring that it stays? I mean, like, obviously we've been talking about how the world is shifting and like the workforce challenges that exist, like stuff is changing in the workplace, whether we admit it or not, it's all changing. So how do you as a leader support your team through those changes?
So unpopular opinion.
Yes. This
something that I always felt, but rarely verbalized. I've always thought that my job as GM is I work for my team.
Okay.
Versus like work for my executive.
Okay. Yeah. So they're your priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my job is like literally kind of coaching to a point. I coach differently though. I realize I'm not the best coach. Yeah. I'm more like, watch me and you'll learn.
Mentorship.
Versus, yeah. So yeah, like asking questions, challenging their thought process. Yeah. And that's like, it's asking questions, it's challenging thoughts so we get to the best decisions. It's also giving them like what I see in my perspective. So the way that we're kind of structured is the managers run the businesses kind of from like now to the next 2 to 3 years. Yeah. And then 3 and beyond is like kind of the thing that I manage on a day-to-day basis. So kind of just always like keeping them from being in the weeds of the operation, pull themselves out of the weeds every once in a while. And we do that exercise at least a couple times a year to look bigger picture. Yeah. Think about the strategy, think about where we're headed, what makes sense long-term. Yeah. So there's a lot of that, especially right now, because financial incentives for managers are focused on short-term financial results. Yeah. So we're bonused.
Allegedly they're not, but they absolutely still are.
There's an issue with that because who's looking after the long-term sustainability of the business and the long-term like growth and strategic competitive advantage of the business, right? Yeah. So I hold space for a lot of that type of thing, the long-term. Yeah. I think also just like to make like whatever they need. Yeah. And sometimes they need to be refocused. Yeah. But more often than not, they just need grace and space and support. Yeah. Yeah. Like anybody. Yeah. Like it's like, what do we need? That's usually what we need.
Usually exactly what everybody needs, home or work, wherever you are. You need to be able to fail because that's sometimes how you learn faster. You need to be able to be guided but not directed. Yes. You need to be able to feel like you are appreciated for what you are bringing to the table. And, we're sort of missing that in corporations a lot of the time. In the work that I do with individual leaders and with teams, like it sounds really kind of hokey to say, but so much of like that personal agenda is really like personal traumas, triggers, and wounds. Like all of my desire to get into leadership coaching is because I've seen what it looks like when someone shows up at the workplace as a leader and is bringing their worst selves to the table, and they don't know it. They're just, this is what they do. They're just trying to make ends meet. They're trying to get results and whatever, but they're doing it in a way that is ego focused. And I don't mean ego like arrogant. I mean ego is in like self-protected, and they're doing everything possible to protect themselves in whatever that looks like for them. But in the same way, they're alienating everyone around them. They are not focused on the goals of the organization. They're focused on their own need for protection and safety or success or whatever. And it's just, that is the single thing that I think screws up organizations, is not allowing leaders to do their own inner work and their own healing first before they're promoted. Like, we promote so many leaders who are not meant to lead people yet.
No. Or ever. Yeah. And like, so when you say that, you get one leader like that. And like I said, I've surrounded myself with people like me. Yeah. Now you have one leader like that who has now surrounded themselves with other folks like them. And now the whole organization is being run from that space. Yeah. Right? Like it's and that's, I remember saying that to Todd at the end, like, if people could just lead the way that you do, Todd, like the world would change overnight. It really could, because you if you lead from a place where you are not competitive, you're not protecting yourself, you're not worried about your image, you're worried about the ultimate image of the organization, all of a sudden people can row in the same direction. Yeah. Like you're describing someone who's looking at your team and saying like, how can I make you succeed? Not, oh my gosh, if they're too good, they'll take my job. Oh yeah. I want people. Yeah. Like that's my ultimate goal, to have 6 candidates for GM when I move on. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what a good leader should do, to inspire and encourage. So, but I'm not quite there yet. Cause like what you were just saying, like I ask often for the last couple of years, I'll end every meeting and every like meaningful conversation and say, what do you need from me? Yeah. So I ask it. But I don't get answers enough. I don't get enough. I need this. Maybe they're not sure, or they don't know what. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Once I get an answer to that question, or a lot, then you'll be like, I've arrived. Yeah, they trust me to criticize me. Yeah, that'll feel like success once we get there to that trust and vulnerability stage. Yeah, for sure. That is fundamental, but it is not something that people spend a lot of time working towards in business. Yeah. Let alone in their personal lives, right? Like that's a whole nother thing. Yeah. So speaking about vulnerable personal lives, so you have a little girl. Yeah. A toddler. 3.5. Yeah. Oh, dynamite. Hey, so how has that changed things for you? Because I mean, whether you're a mom or a dad, but let's be honest, you've physically been through the ringer, and you will be that go-to person for her. So what has that shifted for you? Like everybody who's a parent loves being a parent, but I didn't romanticize it at that time. No. And I wanted the experience of becoming a mother, but I didn't fully understand that this little person would literally become your favorite being in the whole world. However, having a newborn, like going through postpartum, the 4th trimester and beyond, knocked me on my butt. Like it was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I felt like I had done some hard things up to that point. But it's like, so what looking back on it, and a girlfriend was going through it. She had her little boy last year and she was kind of in the throes of it. And I remember saying to her, like, it breaks you down so it could build you up in the most beautiful way. So that part, I think, just like the physical capacity to keep her alive and keep us all doing well, like that's what grows in that first period of time. As well as like you love them, but they're kind of like not really a lot of personality at that point. Yeah. Well, I used to joke it was an abusive relationship. Like literally like they keep you up all night. To do things. They give you nothing in return. Yeah. Yeah. And then very toxic. And then they give you this little smile and then you're sucked back in for another night of misery. Totally. Like, yeah. It's like just that glimmer. There's a line in a movie that basically said that. And I can't remember what the movie was, but it was like,
Yeah, there's like these glimmers of hope, and then there'll be months of horror and torture, and then there's a glimmer of hope. I'm like, that checks out. Yeah, like
Yeah.
just these little nuggets
Yeah.
to pull you back in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So then like that breaks you down, builds up your like physical capacity as well as your capacity to love, but like
Yeah.
they're not really anything at that
Yeah.
point. But now what I'm noticing is like it's this other level of breakdown. It's like my belief systems, the things that I'm doing, my relationships, my work,
What
all
matters.
of it. Exactly. 100%. That's
Everything
it. Like
has to change.
what actually matters?
Yeah.
What is going to make like 80, 90, 100-year-old me proud
Yeah.
of the work that I've done,
Yeah.
of the relationships I had, of how I spent my time.
Yeah.
Whereas up to this point, I don't know if I've looked at it like that.
Yeah. But I will tell you, as someone with older kids, like being around when they're babies is, of course, physically somewhat necessary.
Yeah.
But the real work is when they're doing stuff and they want you there. Like I remember when I found out I was pregnant, it was a surprise. And so I had just started law school, like 1 month in. I was like, oh, what have I done here? And we my husband and I agreed. We had good help and support. We were definitely going to make it work. We had grandparents that could help, so it was all good. So I'm like, okay, I'm about to go to law school. I'm going to go back to law school. I'd do a year pregnant, and then I'd have a summer off with a brand new baby, and then I go back to law school. It's like, this feels like a total fail as a mom. Like, I'm just going to bounce out of here. But my doctor said, well, they don't really care who wipes their bums. They don't really care who feeds them food at that point. What they want to know is that you're going to be there at the soccer games. You're going to be there at their school plays and do all of that stuff. And I'm finding that's a whole next level of conversation. Like, I think the parental leaves are step one. I think step two is like, how okay is it with your boss that you might want to be, okay, well, they have a class presentation that they invite parents to. I have to leave at 2:30, just randomly.
Yeah.
Like, how okay are we with that? Being a part of your child's life in a full way. That's going to be the next level of conversation, I think.
So when I went back to work when Maya was 9-ish months, somewhere in there. And at the time we had a nanny. So we had some restrictions with her only being able to work an 8-hour day, et cetera, et cetera. So we started this theme of like, I would start later in the day.
Yeah.
And Nick would start early, finish early, just to keep the nanny and Maya's day at about that 8 hours.
Yeah.
And then it worked so well for our family that we've just continued to do that, even though now Maya's in a school.
Right.
And so like it's less now, like I think 2 days a week now. I'm coming in at 9 a.m., which in construction is unheard of,
Really?
right? And so a few things, like one, a bunch of things came out of this. One, I was surprised at how little anybody cared and how people just like adjusted how they work. So instead of those texts that I would sometimes get first thing in the morning, people would send them the day before or connect with me the day before or just make a decision and move forward. But the part that I didn't understand when I started to do this, but I'm starting to see it now, is I'm watching the fathers, because it's all fathers on my team. Every single one of them has either young kids or older kids that they're still involved in. And they are more inclined to take the 2:30 kids event. And it's just like, it's become a part of our culture in Saskatoon. Like, oh, I can't make that meeting, or we need to move that meeting because my kid's got a volleyball tournament that day.
Soccer
and we're
at
traveling.
4, got to get them from school and get them there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I feel like, again, I did it for me, not understanding that it created a space for everybody to do that.
To feel okay about being a parent first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that everybody should take paternity leave if it's your desire and it works for your family. But I hope that the most senior of executives, the VPs, the CEOs, the COOs, the GMs, I hope that these men are taking paternity leave, because how quickly you would change the culture of an organization.
Absolutely. At the top. You have to start at the top, right?
Yeah. That's what we need to be doing.
It's going to take a lot. Yeah.
It's going to take it's going to take a lot, or it's just going to take one person.
It's going to take a lot of bravery to be that kind of like trailblazer who's willing to say, I can still be an amazing CEO or GM or VP, and I'm also going to do this thing.
Yeah. No, bravery, and then also like psychological safety of an environment that isn't going to then penalize them.
Exactly. It's like, okay, it's so great that you can do all of that, but you're now off the succession plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're just like, quietly, right?
Yeah.
Which is like the same penalty that women of childbearing age pay, right?
Yeah.
Like it's.
And continuing on after the, mat leave's done. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it is. It's a factor for a lot of years, isn't it?
It is. What are you hoping for next for you?
That is a question.
It is. You can answer it or not. Your choice.
Like what part?
Well, you are, like you described kind of, and I kind of get this sense from you, you love to do a lot of things. You love to be going after stuff. So you're at Lafarge, you've been there for a long time, and you had a space that you immediately filled with this podcast. You got a young family. So what does the future hold for you? And it can be vague, it can be specific, it can be 2 years, 5 years, but I know you have a vision.
Yes and no. I've always had a vision up to this point that was very specific. Like I had a 5-year goal. I was that person, right? And Nick had a good point. He's like, hey, have you have they ever actually come true? And I was like, no, usually they're so much beyond my wildest dreams, right? Professionally, that's probably the biggest wild card. 20 years at Lafarge, I've loved my time. Yeah. I'm so proud.
That's your whole career, hey?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a long time.
Summer student till now.
Yeah.
Right? Accounts payable to GM. Yeah. It's been a wild ride. I know that there needs to be change. What that change looks like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm excited for this.
Yeah.
So
what have you learned about yourself through this process of doing a podcast?
I learned as much as I've deconditioned a lot of what will people think or say, it's still there. Yeah. I've learned I can learn new tricks. Yeah. It sounds silly, but a lot of the technology, the editing, branding has been this whole other world. I've always worked for a branded large multinational. You
didn't have to think about that.
No, I didn't have to think about what logos, what colors mean,
symbolism.
Fonts. Yeah.
How to connect with your inner vision of what this is meaningful in a pictorial way.
Yeah. So branding, social media, website design, tangibly I've learned so much. Yeah. And then from a lot of the guests, I've learned so much as well too. Yeah. I would say I've taken at least 1 or 2 nuggets of gold out of every single conversation I've had, if not more. Yeah. I've learned that the talent or the gift that most people have is so inherent in them that they can't articulate it, because that also has been consistent. Yeah. I've learned entrepreneurship is hard, but it sounds like it's what's your path been?
Well, entrepreneurship is definitely hard, but I think for me, it's come down to, and my kids are older than yours, so it's not exactly that they were the catalyst, but they also kind of were the catalyst, is realizing what's the priority for me. And so I've been doing my own deconditioning as well around that. And I think that's been the challenge about what does success look like? What is the purpose of my entrepreneurial journey? Is it sharing gifts? Is it making a pile of money? Is it space and time to be with my kids, to be around my family more? A little bit of all of those are true, but I think sometimes when you go into the corporate space, my journey in the corporate space was, it felt like I was a little bit on a conveyor belt. I don't have to ask those questions. I'm just showing up every day and people tell me what to do and they give me my performance metrics and that's it. So I definitely feel you about learning to decondition projects like the podcast. I'm not doing a podcast, but all the things that you confront along your journey about being authentic. What does that mean? What does success mean? That's been my journey, but it's still ongoing. So it's still a work in progress. But I think we all are finding out what purpose looks like for us. And I think my gut tells me that your podcast is going to allow people to show up and share how they express and chase their purpose in all the various ways that could look.
Right.
And I feel like that's pretty cool, because I think it's good to have inspiration about you can chase your purpose in a corporate environment. You can chase your purpose in an entrepreneurial path. You can chase your purpose as a parent. You can you can really find that fulfillment in so many ways, and you need more voices about how different that can look.
Yeah. What is your purpose?
Well, dang, now I've set myself up for a question I don't know how to answer. At this point in my life, and I loved that you commented about how good it is to like pivot, because I feel like I've pivoted so many times that I think honing in on a purpose for my whole life is going to be tough, because it depends on the mood I'm in and it depends on the phase I'm in. And my purpose right now is I want to share my gifts with people and support them through their journeys to finding authenticity, finding their purpose, finding teams collectively find their purpose and authenticity. So I'm very much passionate about that. But overall, like, my purpose is finding a way to work that doesn't really feel as much like work. Finding a way to blend. I always hate the phrase work-life balance.
Yeah.
Because we only have a life. Like, that's it, right? Like, work is one minuscule bucket of life, but yet it gets this preeminent status that's not accurate. So I want to find a way that I can find work that nourishes and fulfills my life, and whatever that looks like, and then role model that for other people.
Okay.
So that's the overarching kind of purpose phase I'm in right now.
Okay. I like it. Yeah. It's deeper questions for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, as we've talked about a little bit, you're sort of on this cusp. There's a shift at Lafarge. You're embarking on the podcast. You reached out to me for understanding my world and the work I do. What drew you to me?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So, I think the first thing is I had 3 people in my network tell me that I need to reach out to Suzanne. So I thought I better reach out to Suzanne. And I think I literally sent you a DM and said, hey, you don't know me, but I think that we need to chat. And so I think that was the catalyst for you. But why I was seeking somebody out was I'm at this point now, or was at that point when you and I met late in 2023, where I love so much of what I do. However, I was feeling and am feeling like some things need to change. And at that point, I didn't know if it was like how I show up every day needed to change, my work environment needed to change, etc. So it was really just kind of delving into that, the authenticity that was maybe missing, a lot of these different types of elements that I've never really had to explore. Because for the last 20 years, I've been just focused on delivering results, financial performance, strategy, leadership, like almost they're soft skills, but they're more technical in nature. So for the last 20 years, that's been my focus. And in this little pause that I've had, which I've filled it with this podcast, which goes hand in hand with the work of the authenticity and a lot of different things. So I didn't necessarily have the language for what I was feeling, what I needed to do about it, and how I needed to move forward. But in our first coffee together, you understand the financial piece and delivering results, and just how much love I have for the work itself. But because your corporate governance and legal background, there's a lot of parallels between those two environments. But then in this space, you have the language and are much further on your journey of authenticity and just balancing the two worlds a little bit in a way that I really needed that support. And it's worked out well because so you're coaching me through my professional experience and then agreed to host the introduction to my podcast. So yeah, I feel like it's been really good.
We definitely seem to be speaking the same language, right? In terms of what we see in the work world, what we hope for the work world and our futures, and how there is that disconnect right now. And you and I have had such good conversations about just being in that space of feeling that shift coming.
Right.
How do you I don't want to say we're super intuitive or certainly not psychic. I don't think that. But when you can see stuff that other people around you cannot see yet, how do you support them through that without looking like you grew a second head? At the same time. And I think that's a lot of the work that we're doing together is okay, it is important to show up authentically, and it is really hard. And these are not innovative stories. Many people have these stories, but what if we just tried? what if we just gave it a whirl and, you know what, trust that things are going to work out and take those chances a little bit.
Very well said.
Yeah.
Much better said than I was able to get out. But yeah, it is also like you're more inclined to take a chance on it when you feel validated by somebody else that you respect, who has like the clout and the credibility, because that does matter in our space, right?
Yeah.
And go from there. So that was the catalyst. But like many things that have happened to me over the last 8 or 9 months, the catalyst and what I thought something was is not where the journey took me. It's all shifting and changing.
You just have to be open to receiving. You're given an opportunity, but you cannot control what that opportunity shakes out to be.
Yeah.
Exactly. I feel that too. And people had mentioned like, oh, did Pavan reach out to you yet? And I'm like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. And then, magic happens. So, it's really cool that that's how things came to be. And I think people like yourself and like me are going to take these risks to have these conversations, allowing other people who are a little bit maybe less inclined to speak up will start, reaching out to have them with us, and then reaching out to say, okay, I didn't think anyone else thought like me, or I didn't think anybody else was sitting at the table worried about the same things as me, or thinking that things could be differently like I was. And now all of a sudden you're going to create a forum where people can see that other people are ready to hear this. Other people are ready to experience the innovations and the insights and the new ways of thinking that your audience and your podcast guests are going to probably just eat up.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. Like I didn't, when you kind of were like, when I was kind of like, oh, I got to do this intro episode. I don't know how to do it. I got to find somebody who understands. Yeah. Like I don't know how to do it. And your recommendation was find somebody who understands the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And as soon as you said that, that was the little spark in my head. I'm like, I got to go back and think about that. But I think Suzanne might be the right person.
And then I was like, oh no, what did I do to myself? It's like, what did I get myself into? But it was such an honor to actually share this with you, because I understand how impactful this is for you, but also how impactful this can be for the listeners. And so to be a part of it has been very, very amazing and awe-inspiring.